The de Havilland DH-106, often known simply as the Comet, was a pioneer in the world of commercial aviation. It made its maiden flight in 1949 and was the first ever jet-powered commercial airliner. The Comet introduced several groundbreaking innovations, including pressurized cabins, large oval windows, and a sleek aerodynamic design. It could cruise at higher altitudes and speeds than its piston engine counterparts, making air travel faster and more comfortable. However, the Comet faced challenges, including a series of tragic accidents due to structural issues, which led to design modifications and improvements. Despite these setbacks, the Comet's legacy endured. Now let's uncover the locations of each surviving de Havilland Comet. Our first stop is the de Havilland Aircraft Museum in London. Here you can see the lone example of a de Havilland Comet 1A that still has the originally built square windows. This airliner began service with Air France in 1953, registered as Foxtrot-Bravo Golf November X-Ray. However, in 1954, after the Comet type had been grounded worldwide, this aircraft was returned to Britain, specifically to the Royal Air Force Base at Farnborough, for use in destructive water tank pressure testing. However, this fuselage was not used for this purpose. The de Havilland Museum gained this fuselage in 1985, and after an extensive renovation project, it was put on display, initially outside the museum building, before being placed in the museum some years later. As can be seen in these photos, the original Air France livery from its time with them was restored to the aircraft. Next on our list, and also in the United Kingdom, at the RAF Cosford Museum in the Midlands, the sole completely intact Comet 1XB can be found in Hangar 1 of that facility. Like the previous aircraft mentioned above, this airliner started its paying career with Air France, registered as Foxtrot-Bravo Golf November Zulu, and delivered in 1953. While with Air France, this airliner was primarily used in the Paris-Rome-Beirut route. In 1956, the aircraft was flown to the Chester, UK de Havilland facility to be upgraded from the Comet 1A standard to the Comet 1XB standard. This gave the aircraft thicker aluminum skin, round windows, and more powerful engines. At this point, the aircraft was handed over to the Ministry of Supply, which would become the Ministry of Technology as a flying testbed. During this time, the aircraft had a civil registration of Golf-Alpha Papa Alpha Sierra and a military registration of X-Ray Mike 823. These flight tests continued until 1967. In 1968, the RAF Cosford Museum obtained the aircraft for its display. It was repainted in BOAC colors despite never having flown for BOAC, and put on display after that with its Golf-Alpha Papa Alpha Sierra registration. Across the pond in the state of Washington at Boeing's Museum of Flight, there is proudly displayed a de Havilland Comet 4C, showcasing its role in revolutionizing air travel. This aircraft was the first built Comet 4C and the first jetliner owned by Mexicana Airlines when it was delivered in 1959. At that point, it was registered as X-Ray Alpha-November Alpha Romeo. The aircraft was withdrawn from service in 1970 and sold to a company called Western Air, who refurbished the aircraft, but it was never used by them. In 1978, the aircraft was sold to Redmond Air for charter operations. However, it diverted to Everett, Washington in 1979, and due to FAA inspections finding serious mechanical issues, it was never allowed to leave again. This aircraft was briefly used as a firefighter trainer at Payne Field before being acquired by the Museum of Flight and repainted in BOAC colors. Despite this airliner never having flown with BOAC, this is where the aircraft sits today. Back in the UK, at Old Sarum Airfield, a grass strip located north of Salisbury, Wiltshire, has a fuselage section of an old RAF-owned Comet, originally registered as X-Ray Kilo 6909er and named Sagittarius. This Comet was one of the Comet C2 variety and served for many years with RAF 216th Squadron out of RAF Lynham. After this aircraft was retired from service in the 1970s, it stood as a gate guard display aircraft at RAF Lynham until 2011 in preparation for the closing of that base. Originally, the aircraft was to be moved and reassembled at the previously mentioned RAF Cosford Museum. However, the level of corrosion prevented that from happening, and the remaining fuselage was instead sent to its current location at the Boscombe Down Aviation Collection at the Old Sarum Airfield. Still in the United Kingdom, at the Imperial War Museum, Duxford, there is an example of a Comet 4 with the registration of Golf-Alpha Papa Delta Bravo. Initially delivered to BOAC in 1957, this aircraft flew safely for many years before heading to the Far East to serve for Malaysia-Singaposre Airlines from 1965 to 1970. While in the Far East, this aircraft was registered as Niner Mike-Alpha Oscar Bravo. After this stint, the aircraft returned to the United Kingdom, regained its original registration, but this time flew for Dan Air London for another 5 years. In 1975, the aircraft was acquired by the Duxford Aviation Society for display at the Imperial War Museum, Duxford. Originally, after being put on display, the aircraft was outside the museum in Dan Air London colors before being repainted in its original BOAC colors and being brought inside. The aircraft can be found in the Air Space exhibit with other British-built aircraft of all sorts. Comets. In Wiltshire, outside of Swindon, an example of a Comet 4B is stored in a former aircraft hangar located at the closed-down RAF Wroughton facility. These buildings are owned by the Science Museum Group, which uses the facility for conservation and restoration of museum objects. When this aircraft was first built, it started out life with British European Airways, registered as Golf-Alpha Papa Yankee Delta. However, it was quickly seconded to Olympic Airways in 1960, where it flew as Sierra X-Ray-Delta Alpha Lima. After 9 years flying in and out of Greece, the aircraft was returned to BEA. However, again, it did not stay long with BEA, as it was transferred over to Channel Airways, a mostly holiday charter airliner who flew this aircraft until the airline ceased operations in 1972. That same year, as with most Channel Airways charters, this aircraft was transferred over to Dan Air London to resume the same flight service it had with Channel Airways. The aircraft was purchased by the Wroughton Science Museum for preservation in 1979, still wearing its Dan Air London colors, where it sits today in 2023, with a cockpit section from another Comet in Boeing colors sitting next to it. On the continent, in the town of Hermischgau, Germany, at the Flugausstellung Peter Junior Aircraft Museum, there sits a Comet 4C in Dan Air London colors with the registration of Golf-Bravo Delta India Whiskey. This aircraft first served with the Royal Air Force, starting in 1962 with the military registration of X-Ray Romeo 398. By 1975, as with over 40 Comets of various subtypes, this aircraft was acquired by Dan Air London for its holiday charter service across Europe. At this time, it received its second and last registration of Golf-Bravo Delta India Whiskey. After 6 years of service with Dan Air London, the aircraft was acquired by a company called Air Classic, but we have found no pictures of this aircraft from that era. In 1996, the Flugausstellung Peter Junior Museum acquired the aircraft. While there, it was first painted in the local Rhineland-Palatinate colors, but before long, the aircraft was repainted in its Dan Air London colors, and that's where it sits today, along with aircraft from various NATO and former Warsaw Pact nations. Now on to Scotland, where we find in Scotland's National Museum of Flight another example of a Comet 4C, but this one is a little different since it was the last one built by de Havilland. Like our last example, this aircraft started out in service of the Royal Air Force Air Support Command out of RAF Wroughton starting in 1962. While with the RAF, the aircraft was registered as X-Ray Romeo 399er. In 1975, the airliner was transferred to Dan Air London. I know. I think all the Comets flew for Dan Air London at one time or another. Anyways, when this happened, the aircraft received the new registration of Golf-Bravo Delta India X-Ray. This aircraft flew for 5 years until withdrawn from service by Dan Air London in 1980. It was then acquired by the National Museums of Scotland and put on display outside their Museum of Flight east of Edinburgh, off the A199 at the former site of RAF East Fortune. Our last example of a remaining de Havilland Comet is located in Bruntingthorpe Aerodrome and Proving Ground in Leicestershire. The unique item about this aircraft is that it is the only remaining Comet that can move under its own power. There are efforts to return this aircraft one day to a full flight-worthy status. When first delivered in 1963, it belonged to the now defunct Royal Aircraft Establishment out of what was then called RAE Farnborough, but today is known as Farnborough Airport. During those early days, the aircraft was registered as X-Ray Sierra 235 and named Canopus. On occasion, this aircraft will do taxi runs for visitors to the airfield. And there you have it, the history and locations of each surviving de Havilland Comet. These aircraft not only mark a significant milestone in aviation history, but also serve as a testament to human innovation and perseverance. If you're an aviation enthusiast like us, make sure to visit these museums to witness the legacy of the de Havilland Comet firsthand. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more captivating aviation history content. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll catch you in the next video. Fly high and explore the skies of history.